Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be going through the process of setting up a tubeless tire. Well, these are a few things we have laid out that you'll find helpful during the process. One, soapy water. Helpful to have it in a container like this, or a bucket works just fine. Your tubeless sealant of choice. There are several brands that we all recommend, have had great experience with. Some sort of container like what these are provided in, or you may have your own to install or inject the sealant into the valve and or tire. Your valve of choice, we recommend the square style for road tubeless or adventure riding, and the round base versions for mountain tires and wheels specifically. We also recommend you having some sort of a valve core removal tool. It makes the process a little bit easier. And a tire lever may be helpful as well. Sometimes tubeless specific tires have a pretty stiff bead, maybe a little bit more difficult to install. In this particular example, we have a road tire and wheel set that we're going to set up for tubeless. This is an IRC Formula Pro tubeless tire that we do sell along with our wheel systems. We've had great luck with. And in this example, the wheel is already pre-taped with tubeless tape. So first step during this process will be install your tubeless valve, which I have here. It'll include a lock nut, as you can see here. You may need to cut a hole in your tubeless tape. You can either use a small X or cut out a small circle. You insert the valve through the hole, which may be a little bit difficult depending upon how small a hole you made. And apply some pressure down to get the valve all the way through the rim section so it doesn't interfere with the bead. And we'll need to use this thread-on valve nut to secure the valve. And you don't need to go crazy tight, but it does need to be pretty snug. Again, just finger tight is all you're really looking for here. So first we're going to mount the bead on one side. Perfect. All right. So at this point we have a single bead installed on the tire, and this is where technique becomes a little bit more important. But because of the tighter bead setup and the shelf that we have that makes this wheel tubeless specific, it's actually really important to start installing the second bead on the opposite side of the valve hole. So on this end of the wheel we'll install the bead and slowly work our way back around, pulling the bead of the tire down into what we call the center channel or drop channel of the rim. This will ensure that you have enough slack when you make it to the valve to pull the remaining section of bead up over the rim section. And as you work your way to that final bit, it's important to keep some tension on that tire so that you don't give up the slack that you worked hard to earn during the initial part of the installation. There it is. So I did work up a little bit of sweat there. Certainly, because you don't have a tube to pinch, you don't necessarily need to shy away from using a tire lever. Certainly just be careful not to damage the tubeless rim tape that's been installed already. So the next step of this process, we're going to inflate the tire with the goal of seating the tire bead up on the outer shelf of the rim. I have the soapy water here in a nice squirt bottle, which is convenient, easy to use. I'll shake it up so I get a good foam going, and then I'll just spritz this on the rim. And as I mentioned before, we're going to inflate this tire, and to ensure that we can get plenty of air in there quickly, I'm going to remove the core of this valve. So we're going to inflate this with a floor pump, although it is very helpful if you do have an air compressor handy, because it's important to move a high volume of air as quickly as possible to get the beads to seat. The one final thing to check during this process is just to make sure that the bead is properly and evenly seated all the way around the wheel. So we're at the part of the process where we're going to install the sealant in a pre-sized container. And you want to note with whichever brand sealant you're using, they'll have recommended volume amounts of sealant depending upon tire size. So for this particular brand, it's 2 ounces of sealant, which happens to be the exact size of this bottle that we're using here. You want to shake it up to make sure that the particles are evenly distributed throughout the fluid. Remove the cap. Right our wheel so we don't spill sealant everywhere. And then we just pump it. And again, this requires that the tire is deflated beforehand. We'll right it up just in case there's anything to spill. May require a rag to clean things up just a little bit. And then we can reinstall our valve core. So the next part of this process, we're going to go back to the bucket and use some more of the soapy water again. This time it's not so much for seating the tire bead, but just to show us where we need to distribute the sealant throughout the tire. So again, I'll shake it up and we'll just spray it on the rim, tire interface, kind of coat everything. We have a little bit of soapy water on everything. So I'm going to hang my wheel so I can inflate it. One thing to note, if you are new with tubeless setup, there's obviously tubeless sealant in the tire. So you don't want to have your valve in, say, the 6 o'clock position. The pressure of the tire will then spray out the sealant. So we want to keep all that sealant in the wheel if possible. And we'll get some air in this tire. Again, at this point in the process, you may find that certain small leaks are occurring throughout the wheel. It's not uncommon to get a little bit at the valve hole. You may need to adjust the lock nut there. You'll also find, because we did the soapy water throughout, certain spots are bubbling. So it's important for us to evenly distribute the sealant. And in particular, those areas where you have the bubbles is where you'll want to shake that sealant. So we'll work our way all the way around the wheel. And if you have enough sealant in there, especially with the new tire, you'll often hear it splash around. That's a good thing. We'll just work our way around. And any area in particular where you see those bubbles, you just want to give it a little extra time to make sure that the sealant has time to coat that spot. And we'll want to do this on both sides of the wheel. So once we work our way all the way around and there's no bubbles, flip it back over and repeat that process. One thing that's important to note with road tubeless is that it does require some periodic maintenance. The sealant will dry out from time to time, so typically every 3 to 4 months you'll have to inject some additional sealant back into the tire, just so that you have that sealant available to prevent any flats out on the road. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for checking out our video on tubeless tire setup. It's fantastic technology. Hopefully you take advantage of it. Happy riding.